For years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over.
After the devastating floods in Texas, it's been revealed that cloud seeding technology has been utilized. Is there even a remote possibility that this influenced those terrible events? Let's have a discussion about this together. Let me know what you think in comments and chat. Certainly, Marjorie Taylor Greene believes that it's a conversation that we need to have more candidly and more openly. Further examples of how we are told initially this is implausible, it's ridiculous, there's no way that vaccines could cause any harm, they're entirely safe. Don't be ridiculous. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Those twin towers fell into their own footprint by the simple will of Allah. 1 minute you're told one thing, and it turns out eventually that the truth will come out, as it's done in so many instances, and it looks like it may yet do so when it comes to the complex issues of chemtrails that are apparently being rebranded as contrails. First they said we were crazy for saying they're controlling the weather and spraying chemicals in our skies. Now they are admitting that they are controlling the weather and spraying chemicals in our skies, but that it's not causing any harm. Okay, we are doing it, but it's fun. Is that right, Autopen? Yeah, it's good for the sky. Okay, call me crazy, I don't care, but I'll go ahead and say it. Weather modification and geoengineering is deadly and dangerous. Let me know if you agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene in the comments and chat. And guess what? They can't prove it's not. My bill will ban weather modification and geoengineering. The government and companies who profit off these practices don't get to control our weather because we are all affected by it. We aren't lab rats, and weather is not a controlled environment. Well, that seems like a perfectly reasonable submission to the idea of an all-powerful God that would control meteorology and the cosmos as a whole. Do you see how rationalism leads to maximal control for humankind and human institutions, and that human beings are inherently flawed and fallen and somehow will always gravitate towards sin, brokenness and crazy weather experimentation in this instance? The administrator of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, announces that the EPA will be releasing everything we know about geoengineering and cloud seeding. Well, don't hold your breath waiting for it, but do hold your breath, because the air may be full of lethal toxins and heavy metal as a result of exactly this kind of experimentation. Let's have a look at that story in more depth now.
Concerned Americans have urgent and important questions about geoengineering and contrails. The American public deserves and expects honesty and transparency from their government when seeking answers. But for years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over. The Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. As a result, I tasked my team at EPA to compile a list of everything we know about contrails and geoengineering for the purpose of releasing it to you now publicly. In other words, I want you to know everything I know about these topics, and without any exception. Instead of simply dismissing these questions and concerns as baseless conspiracies, we're meeting them head on. We did the legwork, looked at the science, consulted agency experts, and pulled in relevant outside information to put these online resources together. Everything we know about contrails to solar geoengineering will be in there. That means anyone who reads through this information will know as much about these topics as I do as EPA administrator. To anyone who's ever looked up to the streaks in the sky and asked, what the heck is going on? Or seen headlines about private actors and even governments looking to blot out the sun in the name of stopping global warming? We've endeavored to answer all of your questions at the links on your screen. In fact, EPA shares many of the same concerns when it comes to potential threats to human health and the environment, especially from solar geoengineering activities. The enthusiasm for experiments that would pump pollutants into the high atmosphere has set off alarm bells here at the Trump EPA. Prior to now, EPA has never been this proactive to raise awareness about concerns with geoengineering and to stop this activity from being scaled up. This is what it looks like when government actually listens to the will of the people and doesn't try to squash it. You can always trust this administration and this EPA to take your concerns seriously, answer your questions honestly, and carry out the will of voters with integrity.
So that's Lee Zeldin from the Environmental Protection Agency. Here's some excellent journalism from Lee Fleetwood on Substack, who you should follow. The US Environmental Protection Agency has released new online resources to address public questions and concerns about the topics of geoengineering and contrails. What if we were to call them contrails? Yeah, that'll work. The EPA's new move follows the revelation that Rainmaker, a drone-based cloud seeding startup backed by Peter Thiel's elite fellowship, had active government clearance to deploy weather-modifying chemicals over Texas just days before historic July 2025 floods killed more than 60 people. Now, it's such a sensitive and awful story. It's one of those news stories, actually, that I can't really bear to contemplate, along with Gaza and anything that involves the death of children. I recognise our limitations in independent media when it comes to matters of mortality. Somehow we can normalise and accept the deaths of adults a lot more easily. But what appears to be important when contemplating a subject like this is, firstly, we should be responsible when discussing the likelihood that geoengineering or chemtrails or contrails or whatever they're calling them now impacted that particular event. Probably unlikely. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. It would be insensitive to make bold claims about a sensitive subject where dead children lie at the end of the line. But what I will say is the continual refrain that a matter of public concern or debate is a conspiracy theory, or it's implausible, or put on your aluminum hat, forget about it, how ridiculous, whether it's matters pertaining to the pandemic, the assassination of JFK, the fall of the Twin Towers, or just sets of sub-narratives that likely are more truthful than official government or media sanctioned information, are condemned and dismissed as conspiracy theories. For example, overall, when it comes to a subject, just pick one, the pandemic, who do you think is closer to telling you the truth? The BBC or David Icke? Let me know in the comments and chat. When it comes to a matter like 9/11, who would you rely on? NBC, CNN, or Alex Jones? Who would you trust when it comes to the pandemic era, for example? Joe Rogan or MSNBC? Let me know in the comments and chat. That's not to say that David Icke hasn't said things that people disagree with and that are apparently pretty implausible, and that Joe Rogan hasn't made errors, N-word, remember that, or that Alex Jones's position on Sandy Hook wasn't a violation of his usual reliability, and that he's not an eccentric character. In fact, the truth of the matter is that the media landscape has necessarily changed because of technology and because we don't know how to accommodate any other discourse other than state-sanctioned or media-sanctioned rationalism. We've forgotten that a human being is not solely made up of reason, and that reason divorced from divinity leads to selfishness, materialism, individualism, decline, hedonism, and decadence. If there is no God, then there is no reason not to allow the most powerful forces in the world to be individual urges or sets of urges coalesced to make power bases. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I mean? So the chemtrail, contrail subject is an interesting one for precisely this reason. For many, many years, people have said, that's suspicious. What's this peculiar lattice of cloud across the sky? People that I'm friends with have talked about it for years and years and years. Now that there's an acknowledgement that cloud seeding technology is deployed, and that familiar trick of inventing a new term, calling them contrails, not chemtrails, is an indication that something has been going on for a long time. That's just what I think, though. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. The agency's new online resource on condensation trails, oh, I see, that's why, condensation, not con as in confidence trick, explains the science behind the aerial phenomenon and addresses myths and misconceptions that have persisted for decades, according to the press release. The FAA, NASA, and NOAA have officially admitted that jets emit substances that linger in the sky and alter the weather. Well, that's a first. I didn't know about that. Did you know about that? Did you know about that? Let me know in the comments and chat. Now, to be clear, the government isn't calling these chemtrails. They've titled it Contrails Research, a roadmap for 2025. They refer to them as contrails, but what they describe in this document is functionally the same thing that people like me, says the journalist John Fleetwood, have been reporting on for years. Jet spraying substances that linger in the sky, alter the weather, and affect the temperature on Earth, whether intentional or not. This is an admission of widespread atmospheric manipulation dressed up as a side effect rather than a deliberate operation. According to the government document itself, there are two types of persistent contrails that can last for hours to days and have significant impacts on the atmosphere. Now, again, when we talk about the rise of autism, childhood disease, eczema, asthma, respiratory, cardiological conditions, and just sort of sickness across your country, America, why is it that at a time where this artifact of ingenuity is regarded as a disposable tool, that we're eating disgusting, near poisonous food? Why would that be? What does it tell us? Have you examined it? Let's have a think about that. Persistent, non-spreading contrails. These can remain visible and retain their linear features for hours to days. These are some of the subcategories of chemtrails, or contrails as we're now being invited to call them. The document explains they form in ice supersaturated regions of the atmosphere and are likely to be more impactful than short-lived contrails. The agencies even admit that they are easily identified from the ground and satellites as being formed from aviation activity. So keep watching the skies, and next time you see a peculiar lattice of contrail, know that it's potentially negatively impactful, and it's now being acknowledged. The slow release of this type of information reminds me of if you're trying to do a fart at a dinner party. You just sort of slowly think, oh my God, I'm going to have to fart. Let's just keep this thing from being audible. Gently, the information is released into the atmosphere, ironically, like a chemtrail, until we are indoctrinated, or at least somewhat inured to accept the information without challenging it. So yet another one of those stories that should lead you to this conclusion. Never trust the government, never trust the media, demand institutional and systemic change, because if you're not demanding that, you're operating ultimately within the same paradigm that brings you the very problems that you're trying to resolve simply by voting for someone with a slightly different haircut, or a version of a corrupt politician that's wearing a dress. And based on recent revelations around Brigitte Macron, that dress could be hiding a multitude of problems, or at least 3 problems. 1 penis, 2 nuts. The government openly states that contrail cirrus can be difficult to distinguish from naturally occurring cirrus clouds. This means the sky above us is being artificially modified on a scale few imagined, and they admit it's difficult to tell what's natural anymore. How extraordinary, and what a brilliant metaphor. We can't tell who or what to trust anymore. We live in such an overstimulated and artificial environment. How often is it that you feel like you're truly alone with God or in the sanctuary of nature? Tell me, what did you do for the last 48 or 72 hours? Were you ever like swimming in a lake, or alone with an animal, or kissing a loved one, or making love with your spouse? Were you in situations where you were your natural self, or were you primarily staring at screens, concerned about your finances, terrified, eating appalling, sugar-soaked and salt-saturated foods, holding your life together with prescribed chemicals, filling your mind with prescribed lies? Let me know in the comments and chat. You know, man, I got this friend Kyle. He's a pretty magnificent ex-service personnel dude, special ops person, still a young guy. He runs like a school round here that my kids go to, like a forest school type of environment where they learn natural skills, how to start fires, you know, under safe conditions, of course, and how to safely handle knives, and how to be a person in the world, a world that might radically change one day soon. I pray and I hope, and I also preemptively imagine, I prophesy even. And what I would say is that this guy, man, one day he's running that forest school, the next day he's like going spearfishing. I went with him. I was like, he's unhinged himself from the grid. He's unlatched himself from the matrix. Have you? Or is your environment entirely governed and controlled? Even if you think you're a MAGA radical or a social justice warrior, or if you think, oh, I've seen through the Rothschild Zionist conspiracies, or I've seen through the hatred of this new emergence of anti-Semitism, it doesn't matter if you are extreme within the Overton window of their sanctioned information. It's irrelevant. They've got you where they want you. You're on the circuit board of their data. The only way to get out is through connecting with God inwardly and connecting with God outwardly through nature. The senses can be a conduit to the divine. You can access the supernatural through the natural, but you can't access God through living in sort of chemtrail land, by inhaling continually heavy metals, whether that's respiratorily or neurologically, psychologically and spiritually, imbibing their false information continually. According to the document, these persistent contrails have significant net warming impact on the global climate. Don't go crazy. Maybe there is some global warming, or maybe it's being impacted by events that go beyond what you're told here. You know, maybe it's epochal, sort of deep geographical. In fact, their contribution to heating the planet is on a par with the cumulative CO2 emissions from all aviation since the dawn of the jet age. The agencies confirm that contrail cirrus clouds exert what is known as effective radiative forcing, trapping heat in the atmosphere. The report admits that the overall worldwide effect of these persistent contrails is warming. So interesting, isn't it? If they were interested in global warming, as they continually claim they are, why would they not address that? Interesting. So does that mean there's an agenda behind it? Let me know in the comments and chat. You don't need to go into the ridiculous rhetorical territory of claiming that these chemtrail experiments that took place in Texas, or at least cloud seeding, or however they favourably refer to it, impacted the terrible events and the deaths associated with those floods, to recognise that it's likely that events of this nature are being reported deceptively, because if they were reported honestly, they'd have said one of the things we have to do about global warming is stop this contrail shit, because we know for a cast iron fact that it's impacting global warming. Isn't it interesting that that's not a narrative that's out there? Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. The EPA's contrail resource page acknowledges that contrails can create artificial cloud cover, but the EPA downplays the scale and impact, calling it a small net warming effect. It's just a small net warming effect. Global warming's not that bad. Climate change is a hoax. And avoiding mention of sunlight obstruction or sky whitening, terms commonly used by critics. For years, anyone who pointed out that jets were spraying particles that lingered in the sky was dismissed. Now the US government admits these emissions not only stay in the sky for days, but they also spread, cover vast areas and alter the weather. They also reveal that these contrails are formed from the engine emissions of modern jets, which include particulates like soot, sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, and even spent lube oil. Brigitte! These emissions create ice particles that form and maintain these artificial clouds. The government is no longer denying it. Whether the EPA's new portal offers long-awaited transparency or calculated containment of public concern remains to be seen. But for now, the agency has officially entered the geoengineering debate it long pretended didn't exist. So, what does that tell you? In an environment where the Epstein list hasn't been released, presumably because of expedience and in order to manage information, yet another conspiracy has come to the forefront: geoengineering and cloud seeding. One of the things that we have to examine is that it may impact global warming. If it does impact global warming and they care about global warming, why haven't they told us this earlier, and why don't they end the practice? There's some extraordinary contradictions at play, and what these contradictions lead me to believe is that geoengineering is real, cloud seeding is real, weather manipulation is real. Many of the things we're told are conspiracy theories, whether it's Epstein's list or Brigitte Macron's saucy little front pouch, have got more truth in them than they're willing to admit. That means we should be circumspect, open to new information, willing to communicate continually, and to break down tribal divisions in order to create new freedom, new democracy, where you have the maximum amount of control in your own life because you are in nature and in God and in love, not in some box, either of the mind or of the spirit. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat? Remember, we stream on Rumble at these times, on these days. And if you haven't got Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now. Thanks for watching the video. Have a look at this one over here, or join us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Rumble.